that is. If you're following us for the first time, we have been getting a bunch of new followers recently, which is great. Love that. But yeah, if you're new to Ground Pass, this is a mini pod. We record bi-weekly. Nick and I, Nick is a co-host, my co-host on Ground Pass. So we record bi-weekly together. And then every other week we have a mini pod. It's usually me. I usually handle the mini pods, but sometimes you will get Nick as well. So if you are new here, please, you know what to do. Like, subscribe. We produce weekly tennis content, and we also are really active on social media. When the tour is in the States, we're usually going around tournaments, so you can catch Ground Pass on site when we're at local tournaments near you, maybe. And we kind of try and create guides. So if you've never been to a tournament before, we try and give you an idea of what the tournament is about. But this week, we're no longer in Rome. Rome is over. But I have to say, Rome completely delivered. I have my notes in front of me, actually, on both sides of me, so that's exciting. And I hope you also like this new setup. If you have been listening before, you've probably seen my mini pod setup shift from time to time. I'm still trying to figure out a specific home, what looks best, you know. It's all trial and error. Lighting. It really is trial and error. If you want to see the behind the scenes of building out this studio space and what that has been like, we also have a Patreon. And on our Patreon is where you can get exclusive access to the behind the scenes of Ground Pass, what it takes to sort of put this podcast together, the behind the scenes of tournaments, how we plan for those and work on those. So yeah, bunch of things for you to follow. You can, for free, just like this video, subscribe to our podcast, or contribute to our Patreon. But anywho, back to Rome. Rome was an exciting tournament. The tennis truly did deliver, and we have a lot to catch up on in this mini pod. We like to keep these to about a half hour. So sit back, grab a beverage, coffee in my case. We always stay caffeinated. If you know, you know. So yeah, welcome to this little episode. Where do we start? I think we start with the WTA. This was really great tournament for WTA storylines. It really did deliver on not only excellent tennis, but a lot of intrigue leading into the next Grand Slam, which is Roland Garros. And I think we start at the final and kind of work our way backwards, because I think it kind of was the culmination of a bunch of storylines all coming together as one. And in the final, it was between Coco Gauff and Jasmine Paolini. Now, going into this tournament, I think if we said Coco Gauff got to the final, that probably would have made sense. She had a really great Madrid Open, which is a tournament before. She also got to the finals there. So it wasn't that much of a surprise. What was a surprise, though, was Jasmine Paolini. I think she hasn't had such a great season so far compared to last year, where she just burst onto the scene and got to 2 Grand Slam finals. She won her first WTA 1000 level event and, you know, flew up the rankings basically. And I think coming into this year, the biggest question was, can she replicate that? Can she keep that level up? And it wasn't a great start to the year. We have to be honest with that. Wasn't a great start to the year, but, you know, I think with tennis, it's all ebb and flow. And coming into this clay season, I think she really came into it determined to have good results. And that kind of comes from, I think it started with her hiring a new coach. She got rid of her old coach, which she had been with for years, and hired Mark Lopez. Now, Mark Lopez is a former ATP player. He also is a former member of Nadal's coaching staff. He was with Nadal right up until retirement. And when I saw that hire, I knew she meant business. Like, you don't make a hire, I think, like Mark Lopez, hoping to be so-so, especially during the clay season. I really think she wanted to improve her game, make big changes, and through that got to the final of the Rome Open. Jasmine Paolini, if you didn't know, obviously is Italian. So this is a big deal already for Italian tennis, which we will get into. But sticking to this final, I think if we start with Coco Gauff, it was not great. The match before, which was her semifinal match against Qinwen, who also had herself a great tournament. Qinwen, who defeated Aryna Sabalenka in the quarterfinals, had never defeated her before in 6 matches prior on the 7th try. Because, no one beats Qinwen 7 times in a row. But she finally got over the line against Aryna Sabalenka and then comes into this match with Coco. And we definitely thought, oh, great, this is going to be a fun semifinal match, a battle, which is what I wanted. But what we got was some really ugly tennis. We're calling a spade a spade. That was not pretty tennis. And I think they both came into the match super nervous. And maybe that is why the tennis did not deliver in sort of quality. But, and then it was also long. It was over 3 hours and it was close to 3.5 hours. A tennis match, 3.5 hours, which tennis can go super long, but it was a very, very long match and wasn't pretty. And I kept wanting it to end. I'm like, someone please win. And here's the crazy thing. Coco was not playing well, but I think she has made it sort of part of her DNA that even when she's not playing well, you still have to beat her. You still have to put your best tennis on the line and beat her in that way, because Qinwen served for every single set. She had set point in every single set and yet lost the match. And that is a tribute to Coco's grit and determination. And, she wins ugly. We've been saying this since she partnered with Brad Gilbert, and she kind of, I think, learned how to do this, but she really does win ugly. And so that brings her into this finals match. And I think I gave Coco a little bit of an edge because I thought, you know what? Even without her best tennis, which she has not had all tournament long, she can still win ugly. And she just didn't. It was actually a pretty mute final, if you can say that. It was a straight set win to Jasmine Paolini. Jasmine Paolini came out firing. She was like, I am going to win this. I am at my home 1,000 level event. I will win this match. And Coco just didn't have a response. And you don't know if it's nerves or if it's just exhaustion as well, because her semifinals was just so long and grueling, but she just didn't have it. She didn't have that extra edge, that fight to do it. And Jasmine Paolini came away with the win. What does this mean for Coco? I mean, going into Roland Garros, I think she definitely is one of the contenders going into Roland Garros. It's just she probably has to clean up her game. She currently, I'm looking at my notes now, but she currently leads the tour in double faults and is pretty high up on the list on forced errors. So her game is not technically sound at the moment, and yet she's the number 2 player in the world. I think that is really something to talk about and remember. That even with all these technical difficulties that Coco has, the ability that she has to just win, I think it's a great lesson for everyone. And going into, I think, Roland Garros, she's probably going to have to clean up her game a little bit, because coming up against a player like Jasmine Paolini, Aryna Sabalenka, that might not be able to get her across the line. Now, Jasmine Paolini winning this title, she won the singles and the doubles with her partner, Sarah Rani. She did the double in Rome, which it's just, for Italian tennis, it's crazy. For Jasmine Paolini, it's really affirming because she's going into the French Open and she's defending finalist points. I think by winning this title, it's kind of taken the pressure off a little bit. So she's not sort of like focused on, oh, I need to get those points, those ranking points, or I'll drop or anything like that. She's back to number 4 in the rankings, which is a big deal. It's a big deal for her. It means she doesn't get to see certain players very early in the draw, which plug for a future episode coming soon. We are going to be talking about the Roland Garros draw and draws in general, what the rankings mean and, you know, how that affects what draw you see at tournaments. So yeah, like Jasmine Paolini is definitely going into Roland Garros with confidence. And like I said, she's going in as the number 4 seed. Now, number 1 is Aryna Sabalenka. 2 is Coco Gauff. 3 is Jessica Pegula. And 4 is Jasmine Paolini. And you may be asking, but where is Iga Swiatek? Iga Swiatek, who ruled the roost, especially on clay, a few years ago, is number 5. She's the 5th seed. And this has consequences, I think, for Roland Garros. Iga Swiatek is coming in defending the title, and she just has not had a great clay season. We talked about this in our last episode. And when we were talking in our last episode, I don't think we ever thought she would be the 5th seed coming into Roland Garros. But here she is. She is the 5th seed. Does that take pressure off? Does it increase the pressure because now she might be getting different players than she would before in the quarterfinal rounds? This is all things to talk about, which we will be talking about in our draw episode when the Roland Garros draw comes out. But going back to Jasmine Paolini and winning this double and what it really means for Italian tennis, because I think we've been talking about this for about a year and a half now, but Italian tennis is having a moment. And they now have, first of all, they hold the Billie Jean King Cup and the Davis Cup, which I would say is the World Cup of tennis. So Billie Jean King Cup on the women's side and then Davis Cup on the men's side. They have won the Davis Cup now 2 years running. They have a stacked team. There are just so many players that I could just rattle off that are Italian in the top 50. You know, you've got Lorenzo Musetti, Jannik Sinner, Jasmine Paolini, Lorenzo Sonego, Matteo Berrettini, Flavio Caboli. There are just so many Italian players. The depth is really great. Sara Errani, who won this title with Jasmine, the doubles title in Rome. And I think for a country like Italy, it's freaking great. They have so many players. They're doing so well. The sport is now so popular in Italy because of these players and their rise in the ranking. So much so that the president of Italy, which every time I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, like the president of Italy was at Jasmine Paolini's tennis match. He was at the final there to, you know, hopefully watch her win, which she did. You know, I think the Jannik Sinner met the Pope, which is so great. But that's the level of popularity that tennis has in Italy. And I think the Italian Tennis Federation has created an environment for tennis players to thrive. In order for tennis players to do well, they have to be playing tennis. And when you're at the lower rankings, it's really tough and expensive to find tournaments to play so you can raise your ranking, so you can also actually practice. Tennis is one of those sports where you become better by just playing. And they've created a system where there are tons of lower level ITF and challenger tournaments in Italy. So if you're an Italian player and you want to, you know, improve your ranking, get to certain tournaments throughout the year, you don't have to travel far. I think Europe already has an advantage in the sense that it's so easy to travel. I'm here in the States. If I need to go across country, it's a whole palaver. You know, you're on the plane, there's nothing close. Where in Italy, you're in a different country. with a train ride, a 30-minute, 40-minute, hour-long train ride. So they already have that advantage, I think, in Europe. And then to add to that, Italy itself then has so many tournaments that Italian players can go play at and practice and become better and build their ranking. And it also means the cost for them is so low. They don't have to travel far. They don't have to leave home. They also then still have that support of their family and not having to sort of spend so many months on the road. All of that just adds up, I think, to a really great system that they have that is producing these players. It did not happen overnight. It's not like all these players all of a sudden just like, oh, they're, top of the rankings and stuff. I think they built it over years and years and years, and now they're reaping the rewards of it. And I think a lot of federations, including the USTA here in the States, can learn from that, can sort of look at what the Italian Tennis Federation did and see how can we get there? How can we grow the sport? Not just in participation in the sense of just regular people picking up a racket and playing, but how do we develop the sport, the athletes in the sport, and support the athletes in the sport? Because I think the 2 and 2 just go together. If we have great athletes and they're winning tournaments, fans will come along for the ride. Fans will pick up rackets and want to play. And that cycle kind of happens. We always talk about the fact that an American hasn't won a Grand Slam, since Andy Roddick. On the men's side, obviously the Williams sisters on the women's side. But I think it's been too long, and hopefully the USTA and other federations are looking at Italy and hoping to sort of improve their systems as they go along. I kind of have this little segment here before we go on to the ATP, which is something I kind of saw online between the men and women's finals, because so the women's finals was on Saturday and then the men's finals was on Sunday, and kind of the in-between time, there's a lot of discussion happening during this Rome tournament. And it's on the lines of the WTA is better than the ATP, or the ATP is better than the WTA. It's this sort of like, putting men and women's tennis against each other. Who's better? Who's not better? And can we stop that? Is that possible? Is that possible? Can we not do that? Because I think, and I get it, some people are just responding, where someone says, oh, men's tennis is so much better than women's tennis, or vice versa. So a lot of people are just responding to that. But can we just not? Why do we have to compare men's and women's tennis against each other? Can we not just enjoy the game and the tennis and not sort of like reduce it to this sort of, clash of the sexes or stuff? And I know that's such a big part of our sport, with literally the match, I'm thinking it's Billie Jean King and Bobby, can't remember who the male player she played, but there was, they had that whole match of the sexes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll leave links in the description to kind of maybe a story or Wikipedia about it or something like that. But I think it just hurts the sport when we constantly pitch both sides against each other, and I've never understood it. I think it's better to just enjoy the sport and appreciate what these athletes are doing versus pitting them against each other. And it's either, oh, the men's tennis, they're just more consistent, or women's tennis, they just have more variety than the guys. And then, can it just not be? I think I would actually like a unified body. Like, I don't want ATP and WTA. I want them to find something that is in the middle, and both tours can just move on course as one. And I think they are working towards it. Don't know how close they are to doing that, but I think that is something that is being worked on. I just saw so much of it that I think I just had to say something and kind of hopefully just, give our 2 cents on ground pass. I can say, I think I can speak for Nick. It's not, none of the sides are better. It's just tennis, and tennis is great. So let's try that out for a while. And yeah, so going on to the men's side, Jannik Sinner is back. So happy. I am so happy Jannik Sinner is back. And it's not for probably the reasons you think, where it's like, oh, you're a fan of Jannik and that's why you're happy he's back. Not really. Do I love his tennis? Obviously great. But I think I really love that he's back because of the competition. I don't think it's something that I actually noticed or paid attention to when he was off for the 3 months that he was suspended. I didn't really, I think, pay attention to level or, who was winning. I know there was a conversation of, Alexander Zverev and Carlos Alcaraz have this opportunity to take over the number 1 position from Sinner, which didn't happen in the end. Zverev did not play well throughout most of that season. Of the 3 months, where I think he was probably still coming down from his loss at the Australian Open. Carlos won some tournaments. He kind of did well at Indian Wells, but was not also playing his best tennis. Either way, I don't think the point should have been, someone, Sinner's gone, let's take over the number 1 spot. Because I always think in order for, to get the best tennis, you want the best players present at all times. Because I think, for example, if Carlos Alcaraz or Zverev had taken over that number 1 spot, there would also still be the people being like, they only did that because Sinner was gone for 3 months. So I love the fact that he's back, because I think it elevates everyone else's game, because now they're like, the best player in the world is back. We need to beat him. How do we beat him? And I think by exploring that, tennis, they just play better tennis and probably have increased their level a little bit. And I think Carlos Alcaraz agrees with me. During his pre-tournament press conference, he was, he said he's so excited that Jannik is back and he can't wait to meet him in the final. I think I made a joke about it in our reel for This Week in Tennis, where I was sort of like, pump the brakes, Charlie. There's so many, people to play through before you get to the finals and meet Jannik Sinner there. And who knew what Jannik Sinner was going to be coming in as? Was he going to make it to the finals himself? Well, Jannik Sinner played phenomenally. Can you say that? Phenomenally? Can't pronounce that word, but either way, he played so well. He beat Casper Ruud love and won. It was a demolition job. That was in the quarterfinals. In the semifinals, Tommy Paul met him there and did a little bit better. That's tennis for you. Tommy Paul came in and he won the first set 6-1, but then lost the match to Jannik Sinner in 3. But Jannik Sinner's level coming in, I think, surprised a lot of people. But I don't know why. Because he wasn't injured when he left. He was suspended. He was suspended due to the WADA case that he had, but he wasn't injured. So the way I saw it, I always thought, it's weird to say, but I was like, lucky boy, he gets some time off. I always saw this as a time where he could practice, do fitness and stuff. And I thought he would actually get the rest. And I always figured he would come back and just still be Jannik Sinner. But even better, because he's had time off, he had to relax, to just refresh. So I was really surprised when everyone was like, he might be rusty or whatever, especially because if you consider, and I think someone else has said this, I think I read this somewhere else, but when the players go on their off season, when they play, especially the top players, for example, when they play the ATP finals in November, a lot of them now, Jannik Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz, they don't play anything till the Australian Open. That's not exactly 3 months, but that is a chunk of time. But we never talk about when the Australian Open comes about, where are they going to be able to play tennis anymore? No, we just are like, oh, hope they had a great off season. Let's see what they look like in that off season. So I think in my mind, Jannik Sinner just had an extended off season with this ban, and I expected him to come out strong, and he did. He really, really did. And we were all hoping for a Sinner final, and we got it. We got a Sinner final, and Carlos Alcaraz came through the winner in that. Did I expect Carlos to do that? No, I did not, because I really did think Jannik Sinner has had the time. He's, sort of like probably been working on certain matchups and things like that. But I think Carlos Alcaraz proved in this match just how good he is. Looking at his side of the draw, for example, he didn't really play great. He didn't play like sort of phenomenal tennis coming into Rome. Carlos Alcaraz's issues, they're very similar to Coco Gauff. It's not the sort of winning ugly type thing, but he definitely has not been playing his best tennis. But I really do think having a rival like Jannik Sinner makes him elevate his game. He kind of talked about that in the post win press conference, how he said he has to prepare to play Jannik Sinner. It's funny. I'm really always fascinated by how much athletes, tennis players specifically, pay attention to the noise or at least the commentary around them. But it was pretty clear to me, I think, that Carlos Alcaraz does hear some of it, because he used a term which I've heard a lot of people say, where it's like, he's like, he said he was consistent in this match. Like, he didn't sort of like go away or, have up and downs and was a roller coaster. And I think that's stuff people have always said about Carlos Alcaraz and the way he plays, is that sometimes he just kind of disappears from the court. He kind of like goes off to La La Land, and it's like, ooh, it's a butterfly, and he's gone. So he talked about how coming into this match, he knew he had to prepare, he had to be focused, and he approached the match very tactically. And Jannik Sinner brought that out of him. I don't think if he was playing, let's just say Tommy Paul got to the final, I don't think he would maybe have had that same level of focus and determination and, wanting to kind of almost, how do you say, almost just be a pro about it and not just play for fun, which I think Carlos has a tendency to do. And that's what we love about him, is that he just has fun on court sometimes. I think he improvises a lot, and he doesn't really plan too much. And a lot of times that can be great because he's such a phenomenal player. And then sometimes you're wondering, could he not be a little bit more tactical about things like this? So I think having Jannik Sinner back is not only great for Carlos, I think it'll be great for the tour in general. And that was the fun thing about this tournament. I think the gang's back together. On the WTA side, the ATP side, everyone's back. We had a full, sort of attendance of players. I think the only person who didn't attend really in the sort of top players was Novak Djokovic. But I think, his story, we'll see where it goes. I'm of the opinion that he's, 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out of the door. So I do think we did have a full field, and it was really just nice to see everyone back together again. We got the Sinner final we really hoped for, and looking forward to Roland Garros. We might get it again. Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner are now number 1 and 2 in the world. So at least in the draw, they are separated on either side. Another topic we'll be talking about when we do our draw show. And it's really exciting. I'm excited to see what level they both bring. Carlos Alcaraz obviously defending the title. And I'm sure he'll be hoping to get to the final there as well. So let's wrap it up. We're coming to the end of this. Just to mention a few other winners from this past week that I think were notable. And also not just winners, but also athletes as well that did well. We'll start with Jack Draper, still crushing it on clay. I am pleasantly surprised by how well he's doing this clay season. He just didn't have that in his arsenal last year, not to talk of years to come. He just did not have it. And it's really nice to see him, get to the top of the game. He's now in the top 10, and then also show what sort of player he is and have it translate to clay, which I don't think anyone coming into this season thought, oh, Jack Draper is going to do well on clay. So that was good to see there. Lorenzo Musetti, also another addition to the top 10. A great addition, in my opinion. I think he has such a beautiful, gorgeous game with that one-handed backhand. And he's part of the sort of like Italian Renaissance of tennis, where he's been around for a while and it's finally all clicking together, and he's finally believing in himself, I think. And he, that we're seeing that on court as well, getting to the latter ends of tournaments. He was Alcaraz's opponent in the semifinals. So good to see him there too. On the women's side, I would say Peyton Stearns, just, phenomenal tournament for her. Really showed how gritty she can be. If you've watched Peyton Stearns ever, you can just tell what sort of players she attacks. She's so gritty. She digs in. And we saw a lot of that here in Rome. Really great to see her do well as well. If you're on a ground pass, if you're going to the French Open, go to a Peyton Stearns match. It will not disappoint. Naomi Osaka, coming from her win at the ITF, doing well in Rome, really, I think, has learned to battle. She's kind of battle ready now, I think, going into Roland Garros. So excited to see what she can do there after last year. And that match she had against Iga Swiatek was just everything. And let's see if she can replicate that again this year. And finally, Emma Raducanu, in terms of just players coming out of Rome, I think she's almost discovered her joy again for the sport in general. She's now with Mark Petchey. I think they've announced it's a trial, but it has been announced that Mark Petchey will be with her through at least to Wimbledon, where I think in Wimbledon he will not have any sort of TV commitments. He's usually on the broadcast end of things, and he's been like juggling those two things with Emma. So it would be nice to see him just focus all his attention on being her coach. And it looks like she's excited because she has this week headed off to a WTA 125. And I don't think we could have said that before about Emma. I think her reputation was always sort of these big gaps in her schedule. And here she is back-to-back tournaments. So that's really, really nice to see. Winners outside of Rome that happened that I thought were really cool. Katie Boulter gets a clay court title in Paris at the WTA 125 there. Maya Sharif just keeps winning these 125s. Maya Sharif is a player from Egypt. She does really well at these lower level tournaments. She kind of hasn't carried that momentum into the main tour. I was looking at her stats before we started the podcast, and it's like she has all these like early exits. Like she'll lose first round, but then she'll go off and she'll win an ITF event. So the final she played, the ITF was in Parma, and the final she played was with Victoria Mumboku, which we've talked about a lot on this podcast. Up and coming Canadian player. I think she's there. She's really grinding away and on the verge of a breakthrough, and really one to watch this season and into the next for sure. So yeah, those were the winners of that page. I think, there's another one. Giovanni Mpesci Pericard won a challenger event, and it was on clay. He is one I always just like to watch. Really big server. He has not had a great clay season at all, so it's really nice to see him get this win at a clay court tournament going into Roland Garros, because at least it'll give him that sort of confidence that he's okay on the surface. Coming up this week. Now, you would hope this was going to be a quiet week, nothing happening the week before a Grand Slam, but it's busy. It is busy. Like I said earlier, Novak Djokovic is back. He is going to be playing this week in Geneva. Also happening this week is the ATP event in Hamburg. There's a WTA event in Strasbourg, WTA event in Rabat, and just so many players are playing this event. I think Alexander Zverev got a wild card into Hamburg last minute. So usually this week, it's the week the top players usually kind of take off, go to Paris early, acclimate, do all that stuff. But we have a bunch of players playing. Also happening this week is qualifying for Roland Garros. So it is all going on. There's some great players in the draw. Ethan Quinn, Bianca Andreescu got through their first round matches today. We're going to be keeping an eye on them, seeing who makes it from qualifying into the main draw for Roland Garros. And that is it. I think our final thoughts on Rome, great crowds, just Italy loving tennis, and really some great storylines leading into the next Grand Slam, which is what Rome usually does. It kind of gives us a little bit of an insight into what's going to happen in Roland Garros. So players that are doing well in Rome usually tend to more or less do well in Roland Garros. So looking forward to seeing how they all do. Next up from us at Ground Pass, expect our Roland Garros coverage to begin in earnest with our draw show, which will be coming in later this week. The draw is coming out on the 22nd of May. So hopefully we'll have that episode for you either on the 22nd or the next day. And then it's just run and gun gangbusters. Excited for some episodes that have kind of become regulars for us. So we'll definitely be doing our episode on all the fashion kits that are coming out of the Grand Slam. I love to talk about that with Ian of 40 Love Tennis. So hopefully he'll be able to come back on again. He was with us for the Australian Open. So excited for him to come back again for the French. What else? Daily updates. Definitely. So follow us on social media for daily updates from the Grand Slam. And if you're loving what we're doing, again, it really does help, especially with new people discovering the show. Please like this video if you're on YouTube, subscribe as well. And if you're listening to this in podcast form, please give us a 5-star rating and leave a comment. Let us know what you're excited for coming into the French Open. Or is it Roland Garros? Which one is it? Let us know in the comments, and we will see you